Welcome to the DVB Newsroom. I am Myat. Joining us today is Sean Turnell, a former economic advisor to Aung San Suu Kyi and the NLD government before it was ousted in the 2021 coup. And he was arrested for possessing state secrets. Thanks for joining us today, Sean.
Thanks, Myat. It's a great pleasure to be with you.
I would like to ask as a first question, what it's like being arrested in Myanmar? Can you please tell us about your experience in Myanmar prison?
Yeah, so the arrest itself was very scary. I've been worried about it happening for some days because, of course, the coup took place, as we all know, on the 1st of February 2021, and I was arrested on the 6th of February 2021. So I was getting increasingly nervous. And then finally on that last day, on the morning of the 6th of February, I got a message from someone in the hotel just saying that it was, time to get out. But of course, by then it was too late and the hotel was already full of military intelligence people and police and all of that. So it was a very scary moment, but partly alleviated by the normal people of Myanmar, beginning at that very first instance when the people in the hotel just really rallied around me and tried to reassure me and comfort me as best they could. So, I experienced so often the incredible bravery of the ordinary people in Myanmar, but that was the first instance of it. But it set a pattern that was there all the way through.
Yeah, I learned that you won't survive without books in the prison too. You may say that books saved your life. And if you can describe your life in the prisons, how would you describe it?
Yeah, well, pretty awful. So, very direct and honestly, the prisons were terrible. Insane prison, and then even worse, the prison up in Naypyidaw, conditions were very bad. Prisoners were treated dreadfully. So, yeah, pretty bad surroundings, bad food, all the sort of creature comforts of life, etc., not there. So all of that was pretty horrible. But I got through over a mix of things, and you mentioned books, and so that's certainly one way that I got through. Even well before my whole life, I've been, obsessed about books, and so when I didn't have the books, those were the very worst times. But when I did get the books, they were a source of great comfort. But what was also a great comfort, as I mentioned earlier, was the support and help of the Myanmar people around me, many of whom, of course, were in a much worse position than me, because throughout all of this, I knew I had an entire country and an entire government in Australia behind me and pushing for my release, etc. And, of course, the people in Myanmar didn't have that at all. They had their family and friends, but of course their family and friends were under threat as well. So my position was substantially worse. But again, to me, that just underpins just how courageous, how compassionate the people of Myanmar were that I met in the prison, that notwithstanding that things were so bad for them, they still had the incredible generosity of spirit to help me as well. So, if I think of all the ways that I survived, my Myanmar colleagues in the prison, they really just stand out.
Yeah, I noticed that you mentioned a few names who helped you survive in the prison, such as Yakut or Payetu, etc. So
Yep.
I'd like to follow up with that. Can you please explain what is the solidarity between you and the political prisoners in Myanmar?
Yeah, I'm glad you used the word solidarity, because that's exactly the right word. Incredible solidarity amongst the political prisoners, even the prisoners more broadly, I'd have to say. I only experienced good things really from all the prisoners that I encountered, that whole period that I was in the prisons. So, but yeah, certainly amongst the political prisoners, the spirit was incredibly strong. People were very generous to each other. Occasionally tensions emerge between people, but I would say less so than in ordinary life. I think people just recognised that they had to stand together, they had to help each other, support each other, and that was in all sorts of ways. Very practical ways, sharing food, sharing books, looking after each other, just being there when people needed it, because, of course, the psychological pressure as well as the physical conditions were really rough. So, just immense solidarity amongst the prisoners. And I think that's partly aided by the fact that there's a deep assurance, I think, amongst all the political prisoners that they are in the right. You know, that their sentencing, their imprisonment is completely unjust. They are doing the right thing. The wrong people, if you like, are on the wrong side of the prison bars, and that's all part of it as well. That just, I think, makes for a spirit amongst the prisoners that is really hard for the prison guards and other people to break.
I really don't want to recall your bad memories during your investigation, but you mentioned about xenophobia among these military intelligence or military officer. So, how I like to know, how did you find the level of xenophobia among Myanmar military generals, and how did you experience during your investigation period?
Yeah, extreme. In fact, my whole imprisonment was really based on a narrative that they always want to spread, right? Which is that somehow Myanmar is under the control of foreigners and that they're the only people that can guarantee national sovereignty, etc., etc. Of course, if we looked at what's happened since the coup, Myanmar has less real sovereignty now than at any time in its history, I would argue. You know, the country is weaker on almost every index. So if one was, looking at the question of, is Myanmar able to stand up for itself and stand tall in the international community, it's probably at the lowest ebb now than, as I say, it's ever been in its history. But they do keep pushing that xenophobic agenda. It's just a thing that I think is instilled very, very deeply. And it comes through, as you mentioned, right at the top level of the generals who now supposedly run the place, but not very well, of course. But it goes down to the levels of some of the investigators as well. So it's very apparent among them. On the good side of this question, though, I'd have to say that xenophobia and things like that, I found almost no instances of it at all amongst the prisoners. Prisoners of all different ethnicities, different races, different religions, etc., all seem to pull together with that solidarity that we mentioned earlier. I saw no real divisions at all on that front amongst the prisoners, and certainly not amongst the young people. But I'd experienced that even, well before the coup amongst my young colleagues in Myanmar. Some of that xenophobia, again, that the generals sort of display was certainly not there amongst that younger generation. So it's an interesting one, that one. It seems to be very much a problem amongst the SAC junta, but I don't think it's such a problem amongst younger Burmese people, and certainly not amongst the political prisoners.
And I heard, I read from your book that you also met Daw Suu, during the trial. How is she? Did you feel much encouraged by her, or what is the situation she's facing now in the prison?
I was very much encouraged by her throughout the whole incarceration. So I saw her every week for an entire year, the entire time period of the trial, which took place from about mid to late 2021 all the way through to mid-2022. So I saw her every single Thursday. We were able to talk at length, particularly early in the morning on those trial days, every Thursday. She was just an immense pillar of support. All those virtues that we know about Daw Suu, absolutely on display. Incredibly strong, but more than that, just full of spirit. She was funny at times when the need arose for that, hopeful, extremely spirited, extremely proud of the Burmese people and how that they had resisted and pushed back against this military and against this coup. But in absolute top form. Again, all the virtues that we know her for, very much on display. So I used to look forward to every Thursday in order to see her. Intellectually, as sharp as anything. So I would often have questions for her, because during the week, sometimes I'd be reading things and I had questions out of my reading But of course, I didn't have Google or anything like that to check facts. So every Thursday, I don't think a Thursday went by without me going to her with some question about something or other. So extremely sharp, as well as, an immense source of emotional and I think spiritual support, not only for me, but also the other people that were on trial with us. So, I think, my esteem for Dorsu was, obviously astronomical before the coup and before the imprisonment, but it's gone even higher. I have, nothing but the most profound respect for her, and I suspect always will.
I'm very glad to know that, Sean. So that is very inspirational for us as well. And do you see any potential for the release of the political prisoners anytime soon?
I'm certainly hopeful. I don't have any expectations of them, to be honest, because I don't think they're compassionate in any way or anything like that. I think there'll be opportunities where they might think it's useful. And in some ways, my release was similar to that, right? I think they thought they had something to gain, that the international pressure was such that releasing me became, for them, the thing they needed to do. So opportunistically, I can imagine releases every now and then, but they're not people, it seems to me, with compassion. They're not people who are reasonable or rational. They don't even act in their own best interests most of the time, it seems. So, so I'm certainly hopeful on that front, for sure. But I don't have any expectations that they'll do the right thing.
How do you see the stage of Myanmar's Spring Revolution today? Any prospects for a meaningful political pact or prospect for more conflict?
Well, I'm immensely encouraged. I'm horrified, of course, at all the things that the SAC junta are doing. So it's not happy, if you like. My assessment is not a pleasant one, because it's a story of conflict and all that. But what makes me encouraged, of course, are the reverses on the battlefield of the SAC junta. And also, I think if we look at the economic data, if we look at the financial data, it's all pointing in the same direction as well, which is a direction that tells us that at some point the junta will be defeated. They're increasingly desperate, it seems to me, but particularly for foreign exchange. So if we just concentrate on that at the moment, we know that the junta absolutely need foreign exchange. They need that to buy the aircraft and the advanced weaponry, which is the one advantage they have over the resources of the citizens who are fighting against them. But they need foreign exchange to be able to do that. And they're running short of it. And if you look at their economic policies, or what amounts to policies, because they don't really have economic policies worth the name, but if you look at what they're doing, they're all about trying to secure as much foreign exchange as possible. So if we look at banking policy, exchange rate policy, export policy, import policy, no matter what it is, it's all about getting the regime and as much foreign exchange as they possibly can. So that desperation tells us something about their situation as well. It's not only that they're on the back foot militarily. If we look at the economy, that's also telling us that this is a regime in really desperate straits. So I'm encouraged by that, even though the situation is awful in Myanmar, and living conditions of most ordinary people, would seem to be dreadful. But I think the indications are that the SAC junta is certainly losing. I'm also encouraged by the opposition movement outside of Myanmar and of course inside Myanmar, but being able to meet so many people in the opposition movement outside, I'm just incredibly encouraged by them. I think this new generation are just so extraordinarily impressive, and some of the things that they've designed to raise money and to support people inside the country are incredibly innovative, incredibly creative. I'm really struck that for this group of young new reformers, new resistors to the regime, their economic understanding, I think, is first rate. It's the things that we were trying to do a few years ago during the period of government, they just assume. They don't need to be convinced about good economic policies and the like. They have them already. And not only that, they've extended it, you know, and they're looking at new and innovative ways of using fintech and things like that. They've got those wonderful cheeky campaigns of selling the generals' houses and things like that. But overall, you know, it just seems to me to be incredibly impressive. So if I look at it, the situation from that side of things as well, I feel very optimistic.
Thank you, Sean. And one last thing I'd like to ask is, I noticed that you've been working hard for this particular book, An Unlikely Prisoner, since you were released, and now you're doing book launch in, you know, different places around the world. What is the motivation behind this?
Probably number one is that I want the story of Myanmar to be out there, of the suffering of the Myanmar people. And in many ways, the world is just not watching Myanmar at the moment. You know, it's absorbed in Ukraine, it's absorbed in Gaza and so on. But there's not a, you know, terrible lack of attention on Myanmar. And I guess I'm in sort of a unique position of being sort of, you know, almost quasi insider, outsider. But being a foreigner, if you like, there's more attention on, particularly in places like Australia, perhaps like America, UK, places like that, on what I went through. I'm able to sort of shine a light, if you like. People can sort of identify with me. And I think the title gives it away. I mean, you know, here I am, sort of, you know, middle-aged economics professor. I'm not very physically imposing or anything like that. So I'm sort of the last person that people would expect in a country like Australia to be taken prisoner. So I think my situation, my story shines a light just on how terrible this SAC junta are in Myanmar. I think people outside Myanmar can identify with my situation. They can sort of look at a guy like me and say, gosh, you know, if that's happened to him, it could happen to us. So I think it just, you know, I'm hopeful that my story and spreading around by the book and so on can just elevate the story of Myanmar, get international attention on it, and hopefully bring some support to the people of Myanmar as well. But there's a couple of other motivations as well. I think partly, you know, in these book tours, we can raise some funds. That's part of it as well, for the struggle, for the revolution. Also, I think just create a really nice spirit. I've really been struck at these book launches just how the morale of people in the meetings are just so good. People coming together, a reason to come together, I think lifts their spirits. Certainly their spirits lift mine, and hopefully I can reflect that back to them as well. So they've been, in a way, sort of almost joyous and optimistic occasions, even though, you know, the subject matter that we're talking about is obviously very serious, and the situation in Myanmar very serious. So, yeah, so I guess I just see it as a way for me to sort of say a little bit of a thank you, actually, frankly, to the people of Myanmar who did so much to get me through it, and it's a way I'm hoping that I can help them back.
Well, thank you so much for your time sharing with us today, Sean.
Yeah, thank you. Look, it's been a pleasure.